Hail Christ, hail victory. Um, Hebrews chapter 11. We left off with chapter 12. Sarah believing in the promises of God, having the power to conceive seed, giving birth to Isaac, who out of his seed were the promises of Abraham of many nations, kings and queens, seed as numerous as the stars are in the sky and the sand on the beach. Now we go to verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, talking about, Sarah, Abraham, Abel, Enoch, Noah. Now again, with Enoch, the debate is, most people do believe he ascended into heaven. I believe that. Some people believe he actually just, when he was translated, he went somewhere else but ended up dying. But I believe he ascended into heaven as a type of the translation of the saints at the last day. Okay, so these all died in faith, having not received the promises, but having seen them and greeted them from afar. Okay, so they were shown the promises of God by revelation, the message of the angels to them. Abraham and Sarah seeing the birth of their son Isaac, physically representing the promises. The promised land of Canaan is a type of the ultimate promised land, which is the new heavens and new earth, as we're going to find out. Okay. But having seen them and greeted them from far, and having confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Now, I want to address that. We're to be strangers and pilgrims on the earth. That doesn't mean we abdicate, however you say that word, our earthly responsibilities. Right? A lot of Christians kind of believe, well, we're pilgrims and strangers on the earth, so we don't got to get involved in things, and that it's wrong to get involved in politics or trying to make your nation better. I mean, Sarah and Abraham did all those things. The Israelites that were faithful to Jehovah God believed that the promises were far off, believed that the new heaven and earth was the ultimate goal. They were pilgrims essentially on the earth. However, it didn't stop them from fulfilling their earthly responsibilities. However, the key is with earthly responsibilities is to have those in their rightful place, and knowing ultimately our citizenship is in heaven. Right? So, rightly ordered, those earthly responsibilities are good. Disordered, that's when they're not good, and that means when you're obsessing with politics, you're neglecting the work of the kingdom, you're obsessing about things that are not part of the kingdom, okay? You're putting those earthly responsibilities before serving God. That's when they become disordered. Okay, for they that say such things make it manifest that they are seeking after a country of their own. And if indeed they had been mindful of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return, right? Okay? And really what it's getting across, that those who confess such things, that the promises of God are true, that you're a pilgrim and a stranger on the earth, ultimately, your country that you're looking for is the heavenly Canaan. So therefore, for example, if you're an American, yes, it's good to try to make your nation better by getting involved when it needs to be, advocating for the most cherished possession that we have on this earth in a physical manner, which is children, and trying to get rid of things like abortion, trying to overturn the national sodomy law. But ultimately, our citizenship, we don't get too, if those things don't work out, we don't get too down about it. Why? Because we know that our country that we're ultimately looking for is the new heavens and new earth. This is a temporal thing, okay? And ultimately, if our country gets to the point, which it is now, where they're pushing antichrist agenda, then we reject that and we call it out. And our ultimate home is the new heavens and new earth. Okay, verse 16, but now they desire a better country. See, what did Sarah and Abraham, the Abraham land promise? And this is what Christian Zionists today use to justify supporting modern day Israel and its wars, which has gotten America in huge debt, huge turmoil with countries overseas in the Middle East. Well, they used this while Abraham was promised the land. But what are we reading here? That ultimately, as he was sojourning in the land of promise, Canaan, he was looking for a city whose foundations and builders maker is God. And what does that say here? What is that city whose foundations and builder is God? But now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed of them to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. We all know that's New Jerusalem, isn't it? That's the new heavens and new earth. See, the land grant of Abraham was a type and a shadow, and it was fulfilled in the book of Joshua. It's been fulfilled already, guys. In the book of Joshua, that land grant to Abraham was fulfilled. Therefore, you need not support modern day Israel so they can have a fulfillment of that land grant in the future or now. And this is why Christian Zionists, Ted Cruz quoted Genesis 12, 1 through 3, I believe. And it was the land grant given to Abraham. If you bless, this is how they'll misquote it. They'll say, if you bless Israel, God will bless you. It doesn't say Israel, does it? It says Abraham. And that's huge. Why? Because who's Abraham's seed that you should be able, that you are called to bless? Well, read Galatians chapter 3. It's all those in Christ, whether Judahite or Greek. And that land grant was already fulfilled. So what is the author of Hebrews positing now? He's positing that the true promised land is not earthly Canaan. It's not modern day, the land of modern day Israel and whatever they had before. The earthly Jerusalem. That's not the Holy Land anymore. That's not the promised land. Even Abraham and Sarah, who sojourned in it, knew that that ultimately wasn't God's promise to them. That was a type of the promise, but the ultimate promise was a heavenly, better country that God hath prepared for them, a city. And we're going to see, as we go through this, you're going to see that any idea that earthly Jerusalem is the future headquarters of Jesus Christ's kingdom in a future millennium is a lie from the pit of hell. The author of Hebrews directly contradicts that in Hebrews 13. He's contradicting it here. Verse 17. By faith, Abraham being tried offered up Isaac. Yea, he that gladly received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. See, there it is. That's the gospel. I think that's Genesis 22. Abraham taking Isaac to the altar, offering up his only begotten son. Well, who does that remind you of? Well, it's God the Father offering up Jesus, his only begotten son, on the cross. Well, this proves that Jesus, prior to the cross, was already God's only begotten son. That's what makes the sacrifice so valuable. That he was already his only begotten son. If Jesus became the only begotten son after the resurrection, or at the resurrection, then that sacrifice makes no sense. The wording in 1 John 4:9 that God, let's see, herein was the love of God manifested in us, that God hath sent his only begotten son into the world that we might live through him. So it shows here he had an only begotten son prior to sending him to the world. The sending was from the baptism onwards. That's when he was sent, his commission. Well, he already had only begotten son before that. And the answer to when he became the only begotten son is very simple. It's taught to us in Matthew 1:18 through 21 and Luke 1:35 is the only begotten son at the virgin conception when Jehovah God conceived him in the womb of the Blessed Mary. And that's what makes a sacrifice so loving. If he wasn't the only begotten son yet, then the sacrifice really isn't that valuable. Isaac, having not been resurrected, was already the only begotten son of Abraham. So therefore, Jesus, having not been resurrected prior to his resurrection, had to already be the only begotten Son. Very simple. Verse 18, even he to whom it was said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. The promises of Abraham were going to be through Isaac. And as we know, Genesis 3, that is neither Jew nor Greek. Neither Jew nor Greek. Now listen, that offering up of Isaac is a very controversial thing in some circles of Christendom who are denying, who say that to believe that God gave us his only begotten Son and offered him up at the cross, they now the blasphemy of people influenced by Satan are saying, well, that's child sacrifice. Christians are saying this. Then, of course, non-Christians will say this, but this is the thing. Abraham offered up his only begotten Son because he knew that God would resurrect him from the dead. Why? Because the promises of God are true. He already promised God that his seed would be through Isaac. God already promised Abraham that his seed would be through Isaac. And accounting to, verse 19, even he to whom it was said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called, and accounting that God is able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence he did also in a figure receive him back. So that was a figure of the cross and the resurrection, the offering up of Isaac. Abraham knew that God would keep his promises and offered him up, believing that he would resurrect him from the dead. That's the gospel right there, Genesis 22. Okay? So don't let these people influence by saying, if you're a Christian, you say that Jesus can't be God's only literal begotten Son because that'd be child sacrifice, you're influenced by the devil already. Verse 20, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even concerning things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Okay. He blessed the sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim. He gave the blessing to the younger child, Ephraim, which the birthright to Ephraim was the birthright. The prophetic destiny that Jacob bestowed upon Ephraim was what? The birthright of the kingdom. And this goes along with what Jesus told the Jews. The kingdom will be taken from you and given to a nation who will bear the fruits thereof. See, what the Christian teachers don't tell you in the Christian Zionist churches, which are your evangelicals, your Baptists, your Calvary chapels, your Assemblies of God, your Pentecostal churches, your Hebrew roots, your Messianic churches, Messianic Jews, what they don't tell you is, because all they're talking about, we have to support modern day Israel. The Jews are the chosen people. The Jews. What they don't tell you is that Jesus told the Jews the kingdom will be taken from you. Because in the first place, the birthright of the kingdom wasn't given to Judah. It was given to Ephraim. And out of Ephraim would come a multitude of nations, Gentiles. And this is why the church went from being very Judaic-centric, the headquarters in Jerusalem, read Acts 15, to being Gentile-centric, because it was to fulfill what Jesus said, the kingdom would be taken from you and given to a nation and bear the fruits thereof, because that was the fulfillment of prophecy, Genesis 49, I believe, where Jacob gave the prophetic destiny of the birthright of the kingdom of Jehovah God to Ephraim, who would produce out of his seed Gentiles, multitude of nations, Gentiles. And therefore, we have no spiritual, theological obligation to support modern day Israel ethnic Jews whatsoever. The kingdom was taken from them for good. What they do get, though, is the kingship, which is what Jesus already has on the throne of David in heaven, but they don't like that because it takes away their earthly divine right to authority. It takes it away from them because it's in heaven now. This is what we're fighting, friends. This is the whole thing. This is what we are fighting. Okay. In faith, Joseph, when his end was nigh, was made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, He was hid 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a goodly child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. See, this teaches us right here, verse 23. This was a perfect verse to use during the times of the jab, right? Because many false Christian teachers, wicked shepherds, were teaching Christians they were obligated to obey the government, even guilt tripping them, saying, oh, this is loving to get that. Well, this is the thing. There are times where you can obey government, even though the Bible teaches us not to resist authority. Obviously, the context is as long as they don't try to, as long as they're not commanding you to break the commandments of God, as long as they're not commanding you to break God's divine positive law, then we are to resist them, is what Moses' mother did. Okay? And his father. They saw that he was a goodly child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Okay, so obviously there's a time to disobey government, and it is when they're trying to get you to break the commandments of God, or telling you to do it. Verse 24, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Okay? There are times in this life where you may have to refuse goodly titles, goodly positions, because doing that would separate you from the kingdom, diminish your vitality for the kingdom. So Moses chose rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, because, the Egyptians are persecuting the Israelites. What does the world do? It persecutes Christians. Why would you side with the world, and why not share ill treatment with being a Christian? Suffering the reproaches of Christ. Counting the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Notice, Moses accounted the reproach of Christ. Now, Christ here is anointed, and I believe it's talking about the anointed people, the Israelites. Greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he looked unto the recompense of reward. By faith, he forsook Egypt. And that's what we need to do. We need to forsake modern day Egypt, modern day Babylon by faith. What is that? You reject all Babylon's principles. Babylon being this world. Forsake its principles, you reject it. Not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. And sometimes, like I said, there is a time to disobey government authority. It's when they're telling you to contradict the law of divine law of God. Because we have an invisible God, Jehovah, who is ultimately the one we obey and follow at the cost of everything. Okay? By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, representing what? The cross to us. The sprinkling of blood, the Passover, right? That passion of Jesus, his death, burial, and resurrection, and then the sprinkling of blood here, it represents the Day of Atonement, his sprinkling of blood when he ascended into heaven on the first day, when he rose from the dead, when he told Mary, don't touch me. He sprinkled the blood on the mercy of heaven. Obviously, he came back down and spent time with the disciples, but he fulfilled the Day of Atonement. So that sprinkling of blood for Moses, the Passover, the sprinkling is the type, the Passover of Christ, and the sprinkling of his blood on the mercy seat in heaven's sanctuary, fulfilling the Day of Atonement forever. That the destroyer of the firstborn should not touch them. See, that's what prevents you at the last day when you're judged from being cast in the lake of fire, is the sprinkling of the blood of Christ. Blessings in the Son of God. Blessings from the kingdom of the Son of God in the San Gabriel Valley. Hope you guys have a blessed day in Christ. Bye.